Hi, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us for the next sort of installment of this. I'm here today with Peter from Apickle, and we're going to be talking, a little bit about what we're seeing in the market, obviously with a bent towards ATO debt, and looking at really that importance of funding and brokers and that sort of thing in terms of what we do. So, Peter, welcome, mate, and it's good to have you on board.
Thank you, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. Typically, we're having
Yeah,
a wine and a red, so it's a different environment for us. So I appreciate it.
yeah. Yes. Um, Peter, we obviously we work with you and we know exactly who sort of a pickle is, but maybe for those that don't, if you could maybe give us a bit of a rundown of, I guess where you started, why you're in the market, and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So why we started was probably from personal experiences. We ran a property research and advisory business for some time, and we always had a financial component. But prior to COVID, things started to look quite interesting in relation to how we went about the business, what we were actually investing in personally, and the advice that we're giving. So unfortunately, it actually came from personal experiences where caveats and things like that were being lodged on my own personal properties. And I would say to the mortgage brokers that we had within our business is that, well, why can't we just refinance things and debt negotiate with the creditors and we just make all this go away? And it's like, Peter, I don't know where your head's at, but that just doesn't exist. And I said, well, look, I'll make it exist, and here we are. So I was the one that got himself into a pickle, which is how the name come about, and here we are today.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of, I guess, the range of sort of services that you offer, how would you sort of summarize those?
Well, the pickle has simplified support for SMEs facing tough times via our intuitive platform. We effectively are a digital broker platform that streamlines debt refinancing, that automates the workflows and creates a favourable LVR. We even deliver great results for our lender partners. So it just makes a pickle a vital lifeline for a lot of SMEs facing tough times.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And I guess the other thing I'd ask too is that, the sort of funding slash broker market is quite a saturated market, and where you sort of see yourselves as sort of sitting within that, and how you differentiate yourself. And so if somebody was watching this and said, well, when would I go to a pickle? What would you say to that?
Well, it's typically when those matters are just outside of the LVR space. So, and you and I sort of talk about this on a regular basis, where our typical LVR is 120% of the value of the asset. So we've essentially got to negotiate from 120% to what the actual borrowed amount would be. So where we differentiate ourselves as a digital mortgage broker platform that streamlines debt refinancing, that creates a favourable LVR, a lot of our mortgage broker customers and partners that come to us is simply that. They've looked at a matter, multiple caveators that are lodged against the property, unsecured creditors, ATO debt, super hasn't been paid out, BASs are not up to date. So effectively, we've not only got to look at our platform and see which lender can take it on, but can we debt negotiate with those caveators, get them released on settlement to create a favourable LVR so it can be funded, and eventually the commercial brokers that we work with, it's a reciprocal relationship. It goes back to those partners and now they can do the refinance. So it starts off as a restructure and then it ends up being a refinance, and that's where we differentiate ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And it's funny, and that's why it works really closely with what we do, because obviously we're just specialised and focused on the ATO piece, but we often have the same issue whereby we've got to get something across the line with the ATO, and sometimes we're having to negotiate with the ATO around, and for you it's an LVR, and you're bringing the debt down and negotiating that, and we're doing the same thing with the ATO so that the deal actually works.
Yeah, and that's why we love working with you guys, because we might be debt negotiating with the caveators and trying to pay it outstanding super and things like that. However, an effective turnaround strategy is a collective effort. One, we need to be able to identify the lenders that will actually take on that particular client, because let's face it, more than likely they're going to be trading insolvently. There's outstanding tax contributions. So if we can debt negotiate with the KVTORs, that's fine. That's what we can do. What we can't do is the ATO piece. So working alongside yourself is great because that becomes a cohesive and a holistic approach in a turnaround strategy. Because, the word turnaround gets thrown around a lot. However, what is an effective turnaround strategy? It's proving that we've removed the KVTORs and generated organic cash flow. Interest and penalties from the ATO component is obviously being removed from your end, and that is generating organic cash flow for the business. And that's what the federal government wants at the end of the day. They don't want businesses to go into liquidation. They want businesses to survive and move forward.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's one of the things again, we love with working with you guys is we're on the same page. We're trying to actually keep businesses out of the insolvency route. And, there are a percentage of probably about 5% of the businesses that we see need to go through that route, but 95% don't. And that's having those right sort of levers to pull and the right people to pull in when, particularly for us, if there's stuff that's beyond the ATO that needs some sort of address. Or the other thing too is I've just finished, speaking to a whole bunch of broker groups around the issue and what's going on with the ATO. And one of the things that we're absolutely seeing is that, and there's been a lot in the press around how much ATO debt's out there. And it's gone from $26 billion prior to COVID and the bushfires and floods and everything we've had to, we're officially over 50 billion, but we believe it's certainly north of $60 billion because there's another 12 months on the official figures that we have. Plus, it doesn't include all the debt that the ATO don't know about yet because it hasn't been lodged. And one of the things that we're seeing is not only are there more businesses with debt, but on top of that, the average debt size that we are seeing, and we've got businesses and individuals that are sort of anywhere from $50,000-$60,000 to in the multi-million dollars in terms of ATO debt, but our average debt prior to all of this happening was around that $400,000 mark, and we're just bumping up against our average debts around $1 million. Now, I guess our the businesses that we deal with and our sort of client market hasn't really changed that much. What has changed though is the debt size, and businesses that previously might be able to actually repay the debt out of cash flow, which has been our original and our normal go-to. A lot of those businesses can't now, and they need to get funding in. They also need, and this is where, people like yourself come in, because we just can't solve it without funding. But on top of that, it also means we really need to negotiate hard with the ATO to try and bring the debt down by getting those interest and penalties removed so that at the end of it, you've got a deal that the ATO can approve and we can get the business back into business.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, collectively, we all need to empower small businesses by restructuring multiple bad debts. And that's why, a commercial debt refinancing, home loan, and obviously expert debt negotiation services can come into play. And that on average, I mean, we're saving our customers at the moment around $8,500 a month just by actually restructuring their balance sheets, shoring up their balance sheets, and enables them to move forward. One thing that's interesting, however, is that when we look at the market as a whole, there's obviously the ATO component, but I mean, if you sort of read through the news at the moment, a lot of the banks are focusing more on the small business lending side of things and the business lending. And I do believe, a lot of the mortgage brokers have identified that as well, where the banks have certainly shifted their own focus and they're bringing on, their own sort of products and their own sort of home loans. But at the end of the day, there's $1.2 trillion in SME lending in Australia. Around 30 to 40% of that is actually written by brokers. And NAB has around 30 to 40% of that as well from the business lending side of things. But the behavioural SME lending is around 3 years. So that means that there's around $400 billion in new loans per annum that are actually being written. And so if we're to say, look, let's call it 50% of that is actually written by brokers, there's $200 billion a year that's actually been written from the SME lending component. And that sounds great in theory, but if there's substantial ATO debt, which is what you pointed out a moment ago, the servicing component for a director, that is going to start to shift. So there's going to be more declines. And Andrew Irvine, the NAB CEO, come out recently and it was just a financial review that I was reading the other day. He basically said that we are in the toughest part of the economic cycle at the moment. And so if the accelerated debt and the accelerated rate is increasing in the largest that it has in the last 5 years, there's 1.39% of their arrears that has happened in the last 12 months, actually, so 90 days and over. So that equates to around sort of $10 billion. So if that in itself has declined and lenders' arrears has increased, where does that leave the commercial brokers? And so the debt refinancing, the debt restructuring, and obviously your component in relation to the ATO, there really needs to be a cohesive approach between someone like apickle, someone like yourself, working together with the commercial brokers and really creating a holistic approach for the SMEs that are out there and the directors to assist them with their cash flow component. Because, yeah, there's big numbers in SME lending, but there's going to be a lot more declines because of the servicing component.
Yeah, look, you're right. And I think that's one of the things too, is that people often think, it's the big end of town, and those numbers that I said before around, it's officially 50 billion, but that's from 30 June last year, and we think it's over 60 billion. But even if you work on the 50 billion, what we do know is two-thirds of that is owed by the SME market. So somewhere between 30 and $40 billion of that. And this is one of the things that we've been saying to a lot of the broker groups that we talk to is you need to get on board and understand this, because and it's funny, I was with a group of brokers in Adelaide yesterday and in Melbourne the day before, and one of the things I always ask is put your hand up if you've dealt with a client in the last 6 months that has ATO debt, and every hand in the room went up. And I said, keep it up if it's impacted your ability to actually get funding. Every hand stays up. And that's the thing. This, I don't think this is going away anytime soon. So, but what I also say is, guys, there's a real opportunity for both funders and for brokers that are happy. The big banks, they don't want to touch anybody with ATO debt, although the position certainly has softened in that respect with existing clients. And that's certainly what, we do work with CBA and NAB and all those, and they talk to us about it, and they say, no, we are actually now softening our position around that. But there's a big number that needs help and needs funding. And that's why I think having people that, and organizations like yourselves that are actually comfortable with businesses that either need to borrow money to clear the ATO debt or just need to borrow money generally for business, and they have ATO debt, having that level of comfort and ability to go, yes, we got that, we understand that, as long as it's managed and it's in an arrangement, we're good to go. And there's as I said, there's a real opportunity. I think it was it Winston Churchill said, don't I can't remember how it went, but it was something along the lines of, don't waste a crisis type thing. There's an opportunity
Yeah,
there
that's
around
right.
all
Yeah,
of this.
don't waste a really good crisis.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. So I think, that's kind of the place we find ourselves. And on I guess, looking at it from the other perspective, and the reason we're in business is that we like helping people. At the end of the day, every one of these businesses is a family. And there's a director behind it, and there's a family behind it, and there are kids behind it, and there's stress associated with this, and the level of stress in the market is, we've been in operation, and I've been doing this for over 11 years. This is the most stressed I've seen people in 11 years. And it actually breaks my heart to see it, because you talk to these people and, they're not at their best because they are terrified of losing their businesses, their homes, sometimes losing their marriages around all of this. And so the ability to be able to make that sort of difference really makes it worthwhile getting out of bed and helping people. And I just had only an hour ago got an opportunity to send an email to some directors who were being pursued personally by the ATO for the debts of the company, and I was able to say it's all sorted. And one of the directors, in fact, it was his wife, wrote to me and said, "Great, we can sleep at night now." Now that's worth getting out of bed for.
I say it all the time. There are different types of businesses that are in a pickle, right? There are businesses that have exceptional fast growth, and that means fast debt equals fast growth. And that's great. You've grown it, but the reality is that now you've got to start considering consolidation or restructuring, and you've got to shore up that balance sheet to start reinvesting back into the business. And so that might be a very profitable business, but because he or she has taken on so much debt to be able to grow that business, at some stage it's going to start eating into your margins, and those margins are going to start to compound, and that's where it's going to start eating into your profit. That doesn't mean that it's not a profitable business. Just by shoring that up enables that director to start taking that next phase of that business growth. So, we always talk about, sort of doom and gloom in the ATO, but there's some businesses that have just grown really, really fast and have had to take on a lot of debt. And there's great products out there for that. There's some great unsecured products that are out there for that has really helped businesses grow. And there's a genuine need. But when it starts eating into your margins because of that high level of growth, at some stage, you need to start speaking to a practitioner such as ourselves, Michael, to be able to help that business get to that next phase of growth.
Yeah, look, and it's a really good point, Peter. I could name, a dozen businesses that we've seen just this year that have been victims of their own growth, and they haven't taken advantage of those products that you're talking about to fund this. And so what they've done is, and it's the one thing the ATO hate, is that they've used the ATO to fund this growth by not paying their taxes, and then it snowballs and snowballs, and then suddenly they come to us and they're going, yeah, we just haven't been able to pay the tax. And then suddenly they've got a real problem, and the ATO are now looking at them from a viability perspective. Yet they're really good businesses, but they haven't managed that growth piece. So, yeah, that's quite common around all of that. And I think it's just, and look, it's tricky. Business is tough at the moment. Cash is king. It's always been king, but very much at the moment. And so, and often the solution they say to us is, well, we're going to get out of this because we've got a new big project coming up. And you go, well, that's great, but how are you going to fund that? You haven't got the funds to do what you've been doing. And so that's why it's really important that businesses have that expert advice to say, well, look, yes, it's great that you're a good practitioner and you've got lots of work coming in, you're really good at what you do and you're a market leader, but how are you going to fund all this?
That's right. And that comes back to that old school sort of mentality. And you and I talk about this all the time. Who are the advisors you got on your board?
Yeah. Yep.
Can we be one of those advisors to be able to give you the right advice? And for me, as I mentioned earlier, from personal experiences, and it's the same thing, with yourself, the growth that your business has gone through. We've got to be able to identify how we can actually be that genuine advisor. And the more advisors that they have, well, it's all been a part of our growth. We're just very fortunate to have great advisors, and it doesn't necessarily need to be on a corporate level and a corporate board. It's just having the right people where you can make a phone call at the end of the month and go, hey, look, this is the story. And I think being an entrepreneur or being a business owner can be a very sort of lonely space, and they're out there doing what they need to do and generating revenue the fastest way that they possibly can. But sometimes we just got to take a step back and go, all right, who can I speak to that can help me get to that next phase of growth?
We're all out there trying to help people, trying to remove some of the anxiety that's out there, and keep businesses viable and thriving. So, look, Peter, it's been really, really great to have you on today, and thanks so much for your time. And I know it's a busy time of year, but yeah, hopefully there's some sort of information there that is helpful for some people that are maybe listening to this. And if you've got any questions, either reach out to Peter or myself, and hopefully we can answer them for you.
Look forward to it. Thank you as always, and it's been a pleasure jumping on.